Hello everybody and welcome back to more Dragon Age Origins. I'm the Wayfaring Pilgrim. When we last left off, we had a chat with everyone around camp, learning some life lessons from Wynne and Alistair, enjoying some bardic tales from Leliana, and uncovering some memories with Shale, before tackling the final part of in-game DLC, Warden's Keep. We ventured into Soldier's Peak to try and reclaim the old Warden fort, and also to learn about the Wardens of old and their commander, Sophia Dryden, to try and find some proof for Levi that his great-great-grandmother was a hero. On arrival to the keep though, we found that it was infested with demons, walking corpses, undead skeletons. We were met with visions of rebellion and blood magic, things that the Grey Wardens stand against. We did find Sophia Dryden, but as it turns out, it was just a demon using her body as an empty vessel. And we also found the old Warden mage, Avernus, who had managed to extend his life beyond all natural limits using blood magic. He was also responsible for ripping open the veil and allowing demons to infest the keep. After learning about his horrific research and drinking his alchemical concoction he made up to improve the abilities of wardens, he assisted us in closing and strengthening the veil to stop the demon infestation. Levi has now set up shop at Soldier's Peak. We can store our unique items there and go and see him whenever. And we also found some pretty cool stuff as well. We found a cool sword for Alistair. We found a shadow belt for myself, which allows me to dodge physical attack. We found some Warden Commander armour after looting Sophia's corpse. And we also managed to get a weaponsmith up from the star metal that we found. And we will give Alistair that weapon when the time is right. And what we're going to do in this session is we're going to have a chat with everyone around camp, as we always do. And then we're going to do a bit of side questing. I want to knock out some Chanter's Board stuff and some personal quests before we go and see the elves. So without further ado, let's get this session started. Okay, long intro, but a lot happened. So let's have a chat with Wynne first.
What's on your mind?
Do you have any regrets at all?
I try not to dwell too much on the mistakes of my past, of which there are many. I would go quite mad if I did that. But I do have one regret. The greatest misstep of my life, made even more grave because it had dire consequences for someone else.
Tell me, it might make you feel better.
Years ago, I was assigned as mentor to a lad, Anarin. He was my first apprentice. Anarin was an elf, raised in one of the elven alienages, and he was very mistrustful of humans, especially humans in authority.
But don't mages treat elves and humans alike?
All he knew of the humans was what he had seen in the alienage. He was very wary of us. What Anarin needed was time. Time to get used to his new home, time to emerge from his shell, so we could build a rapport. I gave him no such time. I was young and arrogant. He is a mage, I thought. He needs to grow up and act like one. I expected too much from him too quickly. I gave no consideration to his origin or his feelings, and he retreated further from me. All I could think of was how stubborn he was, how he was throwing away all his talent and his potential just to be difficult.
And what did he think of you?
Oh, I dread to think. I was a harsh taskmistress. He might have thought I was a demon in disguise. You cannot plant crops in the cold, wintry ground. You cannot teach a student who is closed off and unresponsive. Patience is what is needed, and I learned that too late to help him.
What happened to Anarin?
Anarin ran away from the circle one night. I had berated him over some trivial, ridiculous matter that I no longer remember. I drove him away because of something utterly unimportant. He was a child, 14 at the time of his leaving. They had his phylactery. and they hunted him down.
Who hunted him down?
The Templars. That is what they do. They hunt down and neutralize rogue mages. They called him Maleficar, a mage who practices forbidden magic, deserving of death. He was a child, misunderstood and lost. I begged the Templars to tell me if he suffered, if they gave him a quick death. I got no answers from them. I was his mentor, and they wouldn't even tell me what became of him.
It's not your fault, Wynne.
I should have known better. I had the best mentors. They were kind, compassionate. Why didn't I learn from them? I failed in Aaron. All I had to do was listen to him. He would try to talk to me, and I would tell him to concentrate on his spells. He talked about the alienage sometimes, and the Dalish. He always talked about looking for the Dalish elves.
Maybe he did find a Dalish.
The Templars are well trained and thorough. That he still lives, it would be a vain hope. The apprentices that came after Anarin benefited greatly from the lessons I learned from him. In a sense, he was my teacher, and I his student.
There's not really any good answers there. Maybe his sacrifice was worthwhile?
And there it is. My story, my one greatest regret.
Well, she approved, so I must have chosen the right options. Lele,
Something I can help with?
I'd like to talk to you about something.
Yes? What's on your mind?
You were a travelling minstrel. Do you have any more tales?
Of course I do. I love stories far too much to keep them to myself. Everyone should be able to benefit from them, I think.
There was another story I wanted to hear.
Which one?
Do you know anything about Dalish?
I know a little about your people, but I may be misinformed, and I would hate to offend you.
That is why we must learn about each other.
I have heard a little about how the elves gained their freedom from the Tevinter Imperium. When Andraste began her exalted march against the Imperium, the elves joined her cause to fight their masters. The great elven leader, Shatan, born in captivity, rose up to lead his people. He foresaw a future where the elves were free. Shatan was killed when Andraste was betrayed, but the elves continued to fight, eventually breaking free of the Imperium. The elves claimed the Dales in the south and settled there in a land of their own.
It didn't last.
The elves lived in the Dales for centuries. They resurrected the worship of the elven gods and would allow the building of no chantry. This angered the chantry, and the hostility between the two factions finally broke out in open war. The chantry says the elves struck first, but I do not know whether to believe it. The chantry declared a holy exalted march against the elves, named for Andraste's similar march against Tevinter. During the exalted march of the Dales, the elven cities were sacked, and the elven state completely dissolved. Some of the elves bitterly accepted their fates and surrendered to human rule, living in the human cities as second-class citizens. But others, still fiercely proud of their heritage, refused to bow to the humans, and instead became homeless wanderers. They were the elves of the Dales, the Dalish.
What do you know about Andraste?
Andraste was the Maker's chosen. The Maker had long since abandoned the world when the sound of her singing turned his ear. Beauty, grace, and wisdom enraptured him, and he offered to take her from this flawed world to become his divine bride. But Andraste had an earthly husband and would not forsake him. Instead, she beseeched the Maker to return to his people once more. So earnest was her plea that the Maker was moved, and promised that he would create a paradise on earth if all abandoned their false gods and turned once more to him. And this is why Andraste began her exalted march on the idolaters of the Tevinter Imperium, the Maker granted her his powers with which to smite her enemies. Indrasti brought the Imperium to its knees, and her victories converted many to the worship of the Maker.
Let's move on. Okay, bit of approval there. Zevran?
Here I am.
I have questions.
Oh, this should be good. Go ahead.
Let's move on. Nothing to say. Alistair?
I'm wondering something. I'd like to know your thoughts about some of our traveling companions. Do you mind if I ask?
Sure, I don't mind.
Zevran, the elf. You can't trust him, can you? Do you believe his so-called vow?
Maybe, we'll see.
That's a lot to put on a maybe, isn't it? He's an assassin. The crows aren't known for giving up. Maybe he's just biding his time.
If he tries anything, then he'll die.
Well, at least you're considering the possibility. He just seems shifty to me. What about Sten? The way he looks at me with those eyes. Creepy. And he's so quiet for someone so big.
There's no reason to be frightened of Stan.
I know. The more I talk to him, the more it seems like his philosophy is not so vile as the Chantry describes it. It's an odd thing to think. And yet, he killed all those people. He doesn't even deny it. Doesn't that bother you?
It bothers me a little.
Yet he seems otherwise honorable and even wise. I don't get it. What about Liliana? Is she crazy? Or do you really believe in her vision?
I believe that she believes in a vision.
That's one way to put it. I don't know what to make of her. If you look at her when she doesn't see you, she just looks so sad. I almost feel guilty taking her away from her life.
I don't. This is good for her.
Good for you, maybe. Her, I'm not so sure about. Morrigan, do you trust her? Think about it. Maybe Flemeth sent her with us for some other reason than she said.
You really don't like each other, do you?
Well, aside from the fact that she's a complete and utter bitch, no, I don't like her at all. Why, do you?
I don't have to like her. She's useful.
That's the most sensible thing I've heard out of you yet. Just remember that she's dangerous too, and evil, and mean. Enough. I think my curiosity is sated. Let's get back to it, shall we? Ask away.
I have questions.
Of course.
Nothing. Never mind. Okay. Steniel?
You called.
I have a question.
I am hardly surprised.
Nothing there.
Very well.
Let's go.
As you wish.
Nothing from Sten. Shale?
I've watched a lot of humans in my time. It should be aware that I've decided that it is not much like any of them.
Because I'm not human?
Oh, it's not just that. Well, I'm sure that's part of it, but it's not only that. Surely it must come from some superior lineage, yes? Some breed of flesh creature that has decided to elevate its genetic stock above its natural shortcomings?
Very likely. I am Dalish after all.
Then that must be it. The humans have always spoken about elves being inferior, but obviously this is their own stupidity talking. I would appreciate if it didn't spread around that I said anything. Humans might start to get the wrong idea. They might start thinking their race is not completely hopeless.
And we wouldn't want that.
Indeed. Can it imagine the horror? Now, let us crush something into a fine paste before it starts to think I've gone all soft. Perish the thought.
I love Shale. He's awesome.
It
She's
speaks.
awesome. It's a she. I have questions.
It doesn't have better things to do.
Are those crystals in your skin?
I like to think of them as accessories.
Do all golems have them?
I suspect that it is an art that was practiced when golems were more, commonplace. My former master collected whatever lore he could find on the subject. He searched far and wide to collect what crystals he could and then added them. It is not an unpleasant sensation.
That still doesn't explain anything.
As I understand it, the crystals allow me to alter the flow of magic around me. Wilhelm had hoped to turn me into a battery of mana, something he could tap at will.
Did he succeed?
Not really, although now that I think of it, these attempts may be what caused my disruption. Some of the crystals increase the presence of mana, some absorb or reflect spells. There are various kinds. All I can promise is that should it ever find one of these crystals, I can likely tell it the function and what it would do if added to me.
Would you be willing to have more added?
Why not? I don't get to wear clothing and other adornments like the rest of you creatures after all. That answers its question, I assume? Unless it has more.
How did you end up in Honleif? Do you remember?
Oh yes, that I remember quite well. My former master, the Mage Wilhelm, he brought me. As I recall, he had acquired some position with whatever lord ruled the land. I, being little more than a glorified possession at the time, was brought along. Oh, how he enjoyed impressing the villagers with me. Gollum snarl at that villager there, be fearsome. And of course, I would have to do it.
I would have thought you'd enjoy scaring humans.
I'd have happily stomped them all into paste, and then ripped down their little houses and stomped on them, too. In fact, after 30 years of watching them, I'd do it twice. What I didn't like was being ordered to do it. Dangled in front of those frightened morons like some scary thing. Once I was a statue, it took those villagers years before they'd even approach me. The first one to actually work up the nerve to touch me urinated himself. Ugh.
You didn't like this Wilhelm, I take it?
He did love using that control rod. Fondled it so much his wife actually threatened to throw it in the lake. Ha! I would have liked to have seen that. Which reminds me, where did it find the rod? Did it pay a great deal for it?
Not really. It was quite the bargain.
So long as it realizes that I'm inexpensive and not cheap.
But why were you in front of the tower?
That is where Wilhelm kept me. He wanted me out in the open where I could be frightening like a scarecrow. I was supposed to watch for thieves. Pah! Plus, his wife didn't want me indoors. She said there wasn't room for me. Hag.
His wife?
I was once larger, 10 feet tall. Then the loathsome hag complained that I couldn't fit through the doors. So the mage had me shrunk down. Can it believe it? And she still wanted me out.
How does someone shrink a golem?
With a chisel. And a lot of nerve.
Ah. Interesting. I'm done asking about that.
Good. I was just about done talking about it. It does like to have a good chat now and again, doesn't it?
That's how I get to know you, Shale. Morrigan? Anything to say?
I await your command.
I'd like to ask you something.
So, full of questions, are you?
Nothing to say. And finally, the dog, if it has anything to say, or if there's any cutscenes. I'll pet the Mabari, why not? Okay. Does anyone need leveling? Is there any equipment to look through? As you can see, my equip load is a lot lower now, or my carry weight is a lot lower. I've got more capacity as I've stored all my unique items, apart from a few things. I've kept Starfang, I've kept Kaelin's stuff, and Winter's Breath on me. Same with the one commander armour. Just stuff I can't use yet, but want to use. Get rid of that. Okay, so anyone need leveling first of all? I think we're all good there. Any equipment to look through? I think I'm okay. Alistair, I think he's okay. Astron's Might, more damage, more armor penetration, and weakens Darkspawn as well. Can't use the armor yet. Needs 36 strength, and he's got 30. So he's got a little way to go yet. .36 magic needed for that. Morrigan has 30, so a little way to go there. Lele's fine. Wynne's fine. I'll get rid of those because he's already got them. Zephyrin, I think, is fine. Shale's fine. I've got no jewellery to give to anyone, apart from the stuff I don't want to use yet. We'll give this stuff to Bodan, and then we'll head off.